Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Fake Accents Unite. As you can notice, the time is a brisk and punctual 20:30 GMT. So we shouldn't be too late, although it's now 20:31, so I'm sure we'll get some message through in a second of someone saying, "You're 28 seconds late," or something to that effect. I am joined this evening, as usual, by the Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Well, good evening. I am sure that the person informing us will possibly be of a Scandinavian extraction.
Well, it could be one of two people, you see. It depends if Scowen has turned up or if it's Architect of Fate who's on the battering ram this evening.
Is he the honorary? Is he the honorary Dane? Is he?
Yes. Several people have decided to take over duties whilst Scowen has been away. So there's that.
Just a thought, just a completely random thought, and let's face it, a lot of this is about completely random thoughts.
Let's face it, all of your thoughts are random.
Well, there is that. Yes. Why are the Danes deemed Scandinavians? I mean, if you think of it, when you actually look at the geography of the place, I mean, the Danes are this sort of, bit of land kind of sticking out of Germany, if you know what I mean. Whereas the rest of what we would term Scandinavia is sort of separate. So why are the Danes Scandinavians?
Maybe they brought a bit of Scandinavia back with them. And it sort of took root, and then like a kind of mould spread over the entire country.
If the Winter Olympics are anything to go by, the Danes are definitely not Scandinavians.
Wasn't it because Denmark was part of the Swedish Empire, or vice versa, or something?
I would assume it's more than likely, at first at least, it will have been the other way around. That the upper regions of Scandinavia will more than likely have been dominated by the Danes, but I could well imagine that once the Swedes kind of got their act together, then the Danes might have fallen under the Swedes. But I'm completely guessing here. I don't know. But all I know is that as far as Winter Olympic Games medals are concerned, I think the Danes actually only ever won one. Which, given how well the rest of them do in that particular competition, yes, it's all the more reason to ask, why are the Danes deemed Scandinavians?
I know so little about the Danish, it's really hard to tell.
Got good pastries and bacon.
Goodness
gracious.
Precisely.
They are the people to whom we outsource the herding of pigs.
Before we go any further into pig herding and the many intricacies of the management of that, I'd just like to introduce once again our next guest, who's popped on for a little bit at least, and that's Tailed Feature. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. I'm just trying to alter your volume a little bit. You appear to be a voice of 1,000 thunders this evening.
Well, that's probably for the best because I'm losing my voice. So
yes, we shall appreciate the kind of the breathy undertones. You won't be. Is this because you? What people don't realise is that the Count Dankula's theme music has to be redone every week, and it's not a guitar; it's actually you playing your own vocal cords. That does the outro, the intro and the outro.
It's all done a cappella.
A cappella.
It takes its toll around the wintry months.
You shouldn't have you shouldn't have been contracted to do the Doom Eternal soundtrack in the same way. That's why you're completely ruined right now.
I wish I'd probably get some money for that.
But it's good to see you, man. I appreciate that you've come on despite infirmity. Everyone I know seems to be getting sick at the moment.
I don't feel ill. It's just literally my throat. It's annoying.
People are telling me that super chats are disabled. You don't actually have to send a super chat in, but if I click the button, it seems to give me the option to potentially send myself a super chat. So if anyone could confirm whether or not that button is broken for viewers, that'd be great. Because Kieran is struggling in the side chat, unfortunately. If it is broken completely, you can always send things via Streamlabs. Streamlabs obviously allows me to keep much more of the revenue and is then useful and gets around YouTube and all that stuff there. But yeah, thank you very much. Anyways, People, I'm sure, are curious. For those of you who are interested in more of my sort of psychological content as opposed to the political content, and the attachment theory video that I promised would be out in short order, I still intend to get that out by the end of the week. It is all written; it needs to be made, but unfortunately, I have 2 big projects which are due by Wednesday that are taking all of my time. But we should have, I should have enough time by Wednesday evening, hopefully, if not Thursday, to get that out to you. And when it comes to something more political, I've just launched my biggest project. I intend to do a kind of a longer project rather than a snappy political piece, and I've decided to take on the grooming gang scandal. We've collated over 180 sources of information so far, and we're still going good on that. If you have any sources of information regarding the grooming gangs, please email them to me. My business email is in the About section, or you can send them to me via Twitter. More than happy to receive those through there and add them to the database. I'm also going to get together with Sargon come Brexit Day, so we're going to discuss more things there, and talk to Sarah, hopefully, as well, because she's got some good information there as well. And hopefully this whole thing I can put together into a comprehensive hour-long special that should shed light on everything, and it's all going to be properly edited up and all that jazz. So if you want to see that sort of thing come to fruition and you want to speed it along, obviously do more of what you're continually doing now, donate to the show, become a channel member, support on Patreon, that sort of thing. But that's more than enough shilling for this evening. Let's get on to the general topics of tonight. So the big thing that I think has been going on this week happens to be a chap called Lawrence Fox. I take it both of you gentlemen are familiar with him?
I'm now, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a gentleman of white privilege, isn't it?
The gentlemen of white privilege, who are also he has gone on several podcasts. He went on Spiked, he went on Trigonometry, he was on was it Good Morning Britain, one of the morning shows, or like Britain Today or something like that. He was suddenly featured in The Telegraph and The Guardian and all sorts, and The Mirror and The Mail. So there's a lot going on there. There's a lot going on for this gentleman, and I have an unpopular opinion about Lawrence Fox, because if you've watched any of his stuff, he spends a little bit of time plugging his music career. He seems to have dropped out of the acting business. He's done fairly well out of the acting business, but he dropped out of that and decided that he wanted to do more on music. And my unpopular opinion is I think his music is not great. He sings about the battle against wokeness and stuff like that. And some people
probably having to change careers because he knows that going against the current narrative, the Hollywood narrative, is not good for business. So he's probably just trying to branch out.
Well, there is that element, but he did release his first album in 2016, so we weren't hearing from him then.
Is your argument that he is effectively the UK's Candace Owens?
No, what, in terms of having a disingenuous ulterior motive for doing the things he does?
Along those lines.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's that. I genuinely think that he's taking the opportunity whilst he has it to plug the music that he's been making. And I don't have an issue with that because I think it's doing it. But my point is that I just don't like the music. I think it's a little bit cringe. And I
can't say I've heard the music, so I can't really comment.
He had basically, if you're interested in listening to that, he literally does an opening set on Trigonometry where he opens the show before they start talking to him singing one of his songs. So there's that. But I'm pretty sure he's sincere in his beliefs and so on and so forth. I mean, he's given it enough thought to literally write an album about it.
At least he will have something to rhyme with Brexit in the lyrics. Megxit and Brexit.
Megxit and Brexit.
Sorry, have I just killed everything stone dead?
No, that was me.
I have that talent.
That was me taking a sip from my water. A couple of super chats have come in. Harry Channel says no, and Hammered Spud says super chat's definitely not working. Mr. Gently Benevolent says seems to work. Use this for Britishers antibiotics. So thank you to all three of you. Are you still ill, Britisher? Is that what you're trying to get at?
I mean, when am I ever healthy? So yes, I am carrying some hideous thing around, but so far it's contained. Yes,
We maintain that you are the Pandora's box of diseases. So it's like you're gestating something new every time and releasing.
Yes, precisely. I am more than likely the person who has basically incubated this coronavirus, which has then been sprung on the rest of humanity. Yes.
I apologise to people in the chat because some people I haven't explained well enough who this Lawrence Fox chap is. Apparently, he was an actor. He was. I have a couple of articles about it. Basically, let me just sort things out. I don't think I can share the screen, unfortunately. It says. I'd never heard of Lawrence Fox until he started lecturing us about racism. So he went on a British show called Question Time. I think is it weekly? Question Time's a weekly show.
Yeah, it's every Thursday.
Yeah, because I used to watch it quite a lot, but I don't watch it anymore. Really, I occasionally catch it.
I think, like most of us.
And basically the general idea is you get a number of pundits and celebrities and MPs. They sit round a desk, and the audience is made of a balanced sample, in quotes, of members of the public, and they pose questions to the panel, and the panel tries their best to answer them.
Well, hang on. Just in order to further clarify, because that will explain why people have over time gone off it. And that is that it is supposedly a balanced sample of the population. In reality, it's a bunch of activists belonging to the various factions.
Yes.
But also, one is told that the panel members don't get advance notice of what they're going to be asked, which is, I would say, more than likely true. But they will know full well what they are going to be asked. Why? Because it is, of course, the BBC who has received all the questions from the various members, random members of the audience who are actually just activists, and then sifts what questions it wants to ask. And it always ends up allowing one member of the audience to ask their question, which is effectively their choosing which question gets asked, and they are always the talking points of the day. So it's as though they would be going for any other interview, whereby they know full well these are the half dozen bullet points that I have to know about, because these are the issues of the day which I'm going to be asked about. Whereas if you go back 20 years and you watched Question Time, you would sometimes suddenly have some little old lady ask a question from completely left of field that bowled everybody over, and everybody was sitting there scratching their heads going, how exactly do I answer this one?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore today.
So that's the general gist on Question Time. There have been some good moments on it, but it's very soundbitey at the moment. And a lot of it, there's nothing really original coming out of it. Apart from this chap, Lawrence Fox, who went on, I don't know how he secured a place or why they invited him, but he basically just sat down, and a woman from the audience basically said, "You white man, you bad." And he said, "You're a racist for saying that," and the whole of lefty Twitter blew up about this, and most normal people of course, are going, yeah, that sounds quite reasonable to me.
Have you heard about the plant theory?
That she was a plant?
Yes,
because she happens to be... she was a journalist, wasn't she? A contributor to some newspaper or another.
Well, I think she does contribute here or there. She is also, on her own Twitter page, she describes herself as some race and ethnicity researcher.
Oh, yes, because she's supposedly a university professor or something.
Yes, like and she has also been on BBC Breakfast, helping to review newspapers. So I don't think she's regularly on there, but she has been on there. So this is a known quantity to the BBC. So they bring on Lawrence Fox, who has been on these various vlogs, and whose opinion is therefore quite clear. One knows that this is somebody who doesn't hold the correct view, so to speak. no sooner has he stopped speaking on Meghan Markle, one then immediately goes to, in quotation marks here, a random member of the audience that just so happens to be her, who is a researcher on race and ethnicity, who immediately then comes in and says, well, it's really just about racism, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just not.
And I can't help but feel that this was an attempted ambush on Mr. Fox. Basically, we'll send someone in. We'll give him enough rope, then we'll go over to the person who's supposed to shoot him down. And then hopefully they'll have a bit of a ding-dong, and his not being sufficiently expert on this will immediately become clear, and he will look a complete fool. I'm quite certain that that was the intention behind this. Now, of course, you could never prove this, but it did have a certain smell, the whole thing did.
Yeah.
As it was, being the actor or former actor, whichever of the two it is, the moment that she said white male privilege, and he collapsed onto the desk and just looked up and rolled his eyes and went, oh no. And you could just hear the collective groan go through the entire studio audience as if,
yeah.
That said it all.
Yeah.
At that moment, she was just utterly defeated.
Yeah.
And he hadn't even said anything.
I do remember it was a glorious moment where he just said, look, we are all sick of this. We're sick of this narrative. We're sick of being told we're racist. We're not a racist country. We're one of the most tolerant. In fact, one of the videos I made fairly early on in the channel's history, which was called BBC Question Time's Racist Audience, you can go find that if you like, which did pretty well, was about a woman who's saying, it's just funny that you're saying that as a white man. You're a white man. And it's like, and you're a racist piece of shit. I don't know how else to describe it, really. It's just one of those things which seems to come up fairly, not regularly on Question Time, but at least a couple of times a year. And they let people get away with it. That's the other thing. Like, it's always one member of the panel, or one audience member who's bringing up the stats in the previous case. And no one is there willing to defend not only just the empiricism of it, but also the reality of it, which is that the majority, like the distribution of hateful conduct in the UK is down to a very small minority of people, and the vast majority of the cultural trend for this kind of behaviour is positive. It doesn't care. It's the most tolerant nation in all of Europe when it comes to inter-race relations. I just don't understand why that's not pushed more, or understood more, I should say.
Well, I think it's part of that needing to big up the country a bit. As in, it's all right being humble and self-deprecating and whatever, but sometimes it perhaps may be necessary to also point out that we're not actually that bad a crowd. There is a reason people are here. There's a reason people are actually coming here. This idea that they're all coming here, but it's the worst place on earth, is somewhat comical.
It does kind of scream a little bit of not matching with reality. There's a big disconnect there. But yes, so Lawrence Fox did this. He went on and sorted everything out. Basically made his statements. Blew up overnight. I think he's gained something like 100,000 followers on Twitter or something like that. Obviously, he's plugging his music and going on and talking about things. But he's actually got some good points. You can tell he's been listening to Jordan Peterson, which is interesting.
Well,
mainly because...
Sorry, go ahead.
But he was curious about and concerned about things like mental health and the attitude and the education of the young these days. One of the interesting and I guess, like non-Brexity things that he was saying was that he thinks that the inference right now on people, the impetus of kind of move further towards secularism, move further towards introspection, and ignore, he's saying ignore that kind of personal responsibility, not just for yourself, but also towards your fellow man. He brought up the Chinese proverb, I think it is, where a man goes to the teacher and says, "I'm going to change the world." And the teacher says, "Fine, off you go." And the man goes away, and of course he can't change the world. So he comes back to the teacher, and the teacher says, "Well, if you can't change the world, change the town." And the guy goes away again, fails. Anyway, it goes back and forth until eventually the teacher says, "Why don't you start with yourself?" And then the man goes away and goes for that. And instead of pushing that narrative, we just kind of have this whole culture at the moment and this whole impetus of, like, maybe the answer's inside yourself. Maybe the answer's inside yourself. Maybe, look to yourself. But also, you're a victim, and everything else is everyone else's fault. Only you can solve it. But there's no there's a grand battle going on that you have a vital part to play in. But also the whole world's against you, and Britain is a horrible place, and that sort of thing. So, anyway, it's a good interview. If you go watch it, I've horribly misrepresented it, no doubt.
The first thing I would wonder was whether that man, going back and forth with the master was called Harry. But when it comes to this whole Lawrence Fox thing, quite a few people have kind of described it as another Ricky Gervais moment.
In quick succession, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and it may be, you've got people like AA saying these things are kind of controlled opposition. I mean, he's not the only one. Lionel of Lionel Media on YouTube is pretty much saying the same thing, that one is effectively allowing like a pressure valve. I don't believe it is that. I think that we are seeing basically sort of the early shoots of basically two fingers being stuck up to this whole thing, and people just basically saying, "Up with this, we will not put."
Well, I'm curious because Lawrence Fox is not an A-list celebrity, right?
Yeah.
And we also know that we're in a bit of a drought at the moment when it comes to people taking celebrities at their word or at all seriously in the real world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, seeing that not only has Ricky Gervais just stumped up and said, "I don't care, here's what I think," and it's been resonating with people, then you get Lawrence Fox, who is a nobody really at the time. I mean, he comes from an acting tradition. He's relatives with people like James Fox and Edward Fox. Yeah. But he, he's not really in anything big as far as I can tell, unless I've just completely missed that he was in some smash hit at some point.
No, I don't believe he was, a giant of the acting world. No.
Right, exactly. And he's come forward, and it's done him very well. To be fair, he's done well out of it in terms of like the public support he's actually receiving at the moment is pretty good. He's taking no nonsense on Twitter. He's not backing down, and people are loving it. And the I believe Shinobi Yaka, who is occasional guest on this channel and a more regular guest on the Unpopular Opinion show on AA's channel, but also has his own channel where he produces some interesting think pieces as well. Started a hashtag on Twitter called "We Run with the Fox," I think it was, and that was going for a little while. That was quite funny.
It was trending, and then suddenly it wasn't trending anymore.
I know, but there's so many things with Twitter. I refuse to speculate on that. Anyway, so he's doing quite well, and I'm curious whether or not the kind of the extra crowd, the D-list crowd, the C-list crowd are now going to be incentivized by this idea that, we can't really speak out, we must espouse these values, we've got to kind of grind hard till we become A-list, and then maybe our opinions will be taken seriously.
You think that they see a kind of alternative career move?
Yes, potentially, and it doesn't even need to be dishonest.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. That may well be. But I think what is more important is not so much what the motives might be of any people who come after this. I think what is more important is the fact that the only reason they would come after this cynically would be if they notice that this resonates. And the simple fact is, it resonates very strongly. There is no real getting away from it. That there was, I mean, particularly with the Ricky Gervais thing, there was that kind of moment where people felt, finally, somebody has actually said this, which was, for people of my vintage, very much something that resembled the Diana moment, after which, for weeks, the nation had been told that we were all in mourning. And
Yes.
we weren't really. And then Ian Hislop effectively said, well, but we're not, are we? And it was as though someone burst a sort of soap bubble with a pin. That it was that moment when everybody said, well, finally someone has actually said it. And so I think it's quite telling that both these personas are British, because I think we have been under the barrage for longer because we created it, and perhaps more intensely than the Americans. So some of this stuff has evolved into what it is on American colleges and then immediately been re-imported back into Britain. But I think one of the reasons why the uprising against this may be British is because the fatigue against this in Britain may be greater than everywhere else.
The British are good at fatigue. You're quite right.
Well, yes,
it's close enough to the word tea in the middle.
I don't think sort of the Jermaine Greers and whatever old name in America. I know they had their Andrea Dworkins and Catherine McKinnons and whatever, but and the intersectional stuff was actually created in America, but it was immediately imported into Britain, and it was really forcefully rammed down everyone's throat.
I feel like the British are more like the sleeping lion of Britain, and the Americans are much louder and kind of noisy, shall we say, in general. This is not necessarily a criticism of the Americans' way of doing things, but
it is. No, they're loud, noisy, and annoying. Yes,
you could take it as that.
Say it as it is. Yes,
but it does it does take us to the point where there's a lot of noise in America, but over here it tends to be everyone being more reserved. Then as soon as someone does start making noise, people pay more attention. If that makes sense, and if it's something that people pay attention to that is also resonating, then that can have a real snowball effect.
I know full well what you mean. But what I would sort of wonder is, does the American cabinet have a women's minister and a diversity and whatever minister and a global warming minister? And do you understand what I mean? Over here, it has been so completely embraced by every single institution, whether governmental, whether corporate, whether non-governmental, like the BBC and things like that, that, yes, I think we have been exposed to this more intensely than any other population on Earth. And I think that's why maybe the sticking up two fingers will arise here first.
Do you think we've received more of it than the more docile Swedes?
Good question. To be honest, I don't know.
Because I mean, like,
I know that they've got their feminist foreign policy and all that. Then again, we had an ethical foreign policy with Robin Cook right from the off with Tony Blair. I think when it comes to rhetorical overload, we may still be ahead of the Swedes, but I understand what you mean. I may be speaking from a certain degree of ignorance there, because yes, they may be under a similar sort of avalanche as we are.
I can see in the chat Halsey News Network saying, "We don't make any noise, stop being a bigot." This coming from one of those internet radio shows which I would consider and characterize to be pretty strong on the old noise front. So, I feel like you're lacking a little bit of self-awareness, mate. Self-awareness there, mate. And Painted Blue saying that, did we know that John Cleese has retweeted you, Britisher?
Yeah, it's a little known fact, and I don't like talking about the fact that John Cleese has retweeted me.
Who has retweeted you?
Has retweeted me. The fact one of the guy who played Q in James Bond retweeted me, not just retweeted me, but actually retweeted a joke of mine, a member of Monty Python.
That's all right, Britisher. Yes, I know you don't.
I don't want to bang, my drum, and just it would be. I think it would be tasteless for me to go on and on about John Cleese actually having retweeted a joke of mine.
Shut up.
Bugger, mute him.
No, see, we sparked Tailed Feature into life, at least. So there is that as well.
That's the only time I've been annoyed enough to actually interject.
I'm gonna read a couple of super chats. Autocharth says, "I'm up early enough to watch live." Thank you very much, Autocharth, one of the OG supporters of the channel. Thank you very much. Said, "Do Red Dwarf appreciation stream, please. And what are Britishers' thoughts on underappreciated classic The Thin Blue Line?" Did we not? We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, didn't we?
I don't know. Once in a while, I've had The Thin Blue Line mentioned to me. I like it a lot. I think that Inspector Grimm is a comical masterpiece. What's that famous line? "I don't like culture," and then he bangs on about all these, people called Darcy, and eventually he sort of says, "What is it? Staring at posh birds' knickers. That's all Swan Bleeding Lake is about." That's just genius. I think what the series suffered from was the fact that by that time the nation had had a bit of overexposure of both Ben Elton, who wrote it, and Rowan Atkinson.
Quite possibly.
And therefore, I think it didn't do as well as it possibly deserved. Now, it was never an absolute classic. It's not up there with Porridge and Fawlty Towers and, John Cleese's Fawlty Towers. The comic genius that is John Cleese, who recognises a good joke when he sees one.
Britisher.
But not up there with them. But I would say it's a very good piece. I mean, I like it.
It's enjoyable. It's short but enjoyable. And it's pretty good. When it comes to the Red Dwarf appreciation,
in my life.
Sorry, say again.
I've heard that from a lot of women in my life. Short but enjoyable.
Speak for yourself, mate. As for the Red Dwarf appreciation stream, yes, I am still planning on doing that. We should do that in the next week or so, hopefully. We've got kind of a special time coming up. Next Monday is, in fact, my birthday. So we'll be coinciding with a birthday stream. And I know that a couple of people have also been asking whether or not I will be streaming for Brexit Day itself. If I do one, it'll be early, because I am going down to Parliament Square about 3:00 in the afternoon, and going out to help Sargon interview some crowd members and all that sort of jazz.
You're going to be handed a megaphone, and then you can stand there with a top hat shouting, "Stop Brexit!"
I thought you were referencing the fact that I did stand with a megaphone at a free speech rally and give a speech at one point, like March last year.
Is he actually
It's
still
because
there, Mr.
you
Stop
didn't get that
Brexit?
retweeted by John Cleese that Britisher doesn't know.
Ah, I see. I just ended up on the front page of the Times. That was it.
Well, yes, but yeah, no, I remember that. I remember that. Yes, but didn't they misrepresent you as something you weren't?
Yeah, something along those lines.
You were actually a piece
you
of
were a
stock
student.
photography, weren't you?
I was used as a stock photo insultingly, and they cut out most of the banner, which.
But then again, you
which
were
is-
in fact on the front page of the Times.
It's true. It's true.
So
Although
basically,
I
you
didn't
are the
get paid
person
for
who
it.
is on the front page of the Times, and I am the person whose comedy is highly appreciated by John Cleese. The other chap doing on this stream.
It's
I'll just
fine.
read them. I haven't.
Anyway, yeah. So if I do one, it will be early because as I'm going down to Parliament Square to enjoy the festivities and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, I do not have the kind of camera equipment to make anything more. Yeah, but that's kind of larger for that. But I would if I could. So no, you may have to see me in the periphery in one of Sargon's vids there instead. What else? Oh yeah, Red Dwarf
Will you be
Appreciation.
singing any Russian folk songs while you're
No, Ivan. I mean, I will not be taking on the mantle of Ivan Rebrov for Brexit Day. The yeah. So I'm going to
there?
meet.
It would be a good meme to wind up all the people who says that it's the product of Russian intervention.
Maybe if I knew any Russian folk songs, Britisher, that might be possible, but no. Clean Your Lobster one saying NSO is incredibly bland looking, the vanilla yogurt of men. I really have nothing to say to that except go fuck yourself, man.
Don't they actually say that what is actually deemed good looking is actually average? So if you would take sort of facial features
Are you trying to say someone like Henry Cavill is average?
and you create a sort of average face, nothing is particularly pronounced, that is actually deemed good looking.
It's all to do with symmetry, and there are definitely faces which cross-culturally people prefer. There's a lot of research going on into that. So I can't bring any of it up particularly off the top of my head, unfortunately. But it's definitely a symmetry thing rather than a vocalization of features.
So there you go. See, Lawrence Fox better thank his lucky stars that you never went into acting.
I'm not that bland, thank God. I have a big nose, but that's about it.
Instead, hence the beard and.
So obvious, due confirmed.
The Red Dwarf Appreciation stream should hopefully be going on one of these weekends, so that should be good. But I want to get everyone who wants to be involved with it, so it'll take a little bit of putting together. The problem
of doing that on a weekend is the week that was.
Yeah. Like you're assuming I'd invite you, Britisher.
Well, yes, yeah. Just given that I was the one who had the idea for
this, we'll see how it goes, Britisher. We will see how it goes. We'll sort something out that's equitable for everybody, I'm sure, or as many people as can make it at a time, and I will let you know as soon as that's possible. Hinchstar says, good luck with the Muslim rape gang video. This has to stop. Justice must be served. Yes, I completely agree. I've been fired up about this topic for a while now and thinking about how I can make a contribution. And the best thing I can think of to do is produce what it will be effectively a mini documentary on the whole thing, because I feel like as much as there is information out there, no one has successfully managed to put the whole thing comprehensively into a consumable, a kind of digestible product. And I think I can do that. So the plan is to do it. It might take a month. It might take 2 months. But I really want to do this well. As I say, people have been phenomenal with the data collection.
I think the art is not to become dreadfully depressed whilst trying to put that together. I can imagine it will more than likely not be the most joyful of subjects to be working on.
It's not, but it's something which absolutely has to be done. And as I say, hopefully it's not all just going to be on my shoulders and I can bring a couple of people to bear on it to help me go through it. I'm also considering going through a lot of the information again on a stream so that I can get people's thoughts and to ensure that everything goes through smoothly. But it's definitely a huge project and I want to do it justice. I don't want to waste the time. and waste everyone else's time with it either. So thank you for that support. Nicholas Van Neel says, question time sounds like our Q&A on the ABC, which is curated questions from a balanced audience that ends up spewing leftist talking points. Thoughts? Have you watched ABC at all, Britisher?
Can't say I have.
Not really keeping up with the Aussie stuff at the moment with the wildfires and whatnot.
I'm aware of the wildfires. I'm not
Just as
particularly
you're,
sure
just
what
as
the relevance of ABC is.
No. I'm just curious because obviously ABC is the channel which hosts their Q&A, and also there's the fact that I was just going to have a gentle dig at you about your actual knowledge of anthropogenic climate change, which seems a little bit lacking.
Oh, well, so now you're effectively going to jump in on the I'm on the side of pothole of 54 argument, are you?
No, you're not on the side of pothole of 54. Certainly not.
No, I'm not.
No, I know. Where do you think I'm going with this?
Well, it seems to be that you seem to be on the side of pothole of 54.
I happen to be mainly on the... Well, I'm not on the side of pothole of 54. I'm on the side of pothole of 54's approach to the scientific literature.
Well,
and
you see, I'm somewhere between AA, who is very cynical and just thinks it's complete nonsense.
Well, he did call the last segment climate
our
bollocks.
Dear colleague, Tail Feature, who just basically says, it's by now, how on earth is anybody supposed to make head or tail of this?
So you watched my video?
Sorry?
You mean you watched my video?
Of course I did.
You all did.
I watch all quality material.
I made sure to sit through all of the ads on it as well.
I don't get any of the money from that.
Yeah, I know. That's unfortunate, isn't it, really? That sounds like I'm just like beating up a guest who can't fight back.
I just found it bizarre that he should basically mention a particular date, then dismiss that particular measurement as most likely wrong anyway. Then, in order to have another dig at PJW, I mean, not that I blame him for having a dig at PJW, but in order to do that, then puts up a graph PJW showed, correcting him that, it's not actually an average as you're talking about. But if you actually look at the graph, that seems to have its highest temperature at a similar time as the record he's just dismissed. And if you actually look it up on the map, that place is in a similar territory as the one he just dismissed. So here are two places in Australia, roughly around the same time, having their temperature records, and one is only used to make fun of PJW, and the other one is just dismissed as most likely wrong anyway. And
because
you just think,
way above the usual.
This is the scientific giant. So this is what I mean.
He's not.
Yes, it's not. And let's face it, he's talking about, it may potentially be a mistake. And the reason he's saying that is not just because it didn't fit with anything anywhere like the region where it was, and it's an older reading, so the potential for, shall we call it, technological failure is higher.
But it means that two people in two different locations in Australia, in a similar area, around about the same time, made the same mistake.
I'd have to go through this stuff again.
Precisely.
I have to go through this.
So again. Maybe I am not the complete twit and doesn't know
I'm
what
not
he's talking
calling
about
you
in that particular tweet. After all,
I'm not calling you a twit, Britisher. I'm calling the climate change discussion, shall we call it discussion, on Twitter, infuriating.
I mean, that is very much my wheelhouse.
What, infuriating
people?
Are
claiming absolute certainty. And then make 36-minute-long videos in which 5 people on a chat, in which I think only 2 of their voices are audible, then get described as, the equivalent of morons.
Well, I didn't enjoy him misrepresenting my point on that video as having come from Breitbart and James Delingpole when it didn't.
So
I don't think that. I think his wider point was that we are all, including him, armchair experts. I think that was what I got away from it. Not that I'm going to specifically take what you've said and I'm going to talk about it.
No, that's not at all what I took from it. I took it from it that, we're all armchair experts. But I am quoting from the experts whereby you lot know nothing. That's what I took away from it. And, I haven't actually been out there putting out graphs, making claims, saying this is the case or that is the case. I actually got attacked for asking questions on Twitter. Not least, in fact, by one of his chief fans. And that, to me, just says everything about the nature of the debate.
Oh, his fans are as rabid as AA's.
Oh,
and I mean that in a sense of I enjoy both of their types of content.
This chap who was having is pretty much like an attack hamster of AA's. Something, of course, he appreciated greatly. But it is just bizarre, and it's this ideological view. But this is the view, it's the only acceptable view. Any doubts expressed regarding this view, due to the fact that one has now become so distrusting of what is coming out, because so much of it looks like advocacy research, that you end up in the position that Tailed Feature explained, where you just basically sit there, you look at the latest graph, you shrug and go, well, what am I supposed to make of this? Because unless you put in the next 10 years studying the fine print of this at a university, you have no way of discerning the actual credibility of this stuff.
Am I as soon as I finish like this next big project, am I going to have to start work on an inconvenient British truth so that we can finally settle this once and for all, and I'll go through every paper I can find and try and make heads or tails of it.
The simple question is that of the trustworthiness and the credibility of the people who are providing the data. And it's to me, that was just beautifully illustrated by, and that temperature reading is more than likely wrong anyway.
Well, it's one thing to have a reading be wrong. There's conclusions which are made, there are readings and measurements, and so on. And so, unfortunately, if something gets published and it seems to be credible in the journals of the self-declared experts in the field, then you have to go through the point of falsifying the data. Is it replicable? And climate science is difficult because, of course, you can't test the same data point for the same point in time again and again and again. It's not like every single location in the world, or even if we're going to put it lightly, just in Britain, say, has 5 different organisations who all have different sensors, who are all measuring the temperature at the same time, and they're all using slightly different companies to produce that technology, so it's not all the same necessarily, even if it's made to the same spec. And they, you can then draw different conclusions about that. It's not the way it works. And the study of the world, which is an ever-changing landscape, is very obviously difficult. So, and very difficult to do empirically. I see what you're
invited me onto the stream, Mark. I basically said, let's not talk about climate change.
I know.
Yeah, then who went there?
I know. It'll only be brief. I'll only briefly, because I don't think we can address it in any meaningful ways at the moment. And say that the way in which to deal with Potholer is to attack the methodology, not the credibility of the people producing the data. And so AA, screaming at the top of his lungs, addressed the balloon data, even if he did add enough expletives in there to get suspended for 2 weeks to the other day, is another thing entirely. Like, you need to you need to attack that. If he's concerned about models being built on composites of models, and that are they that trustworthy because they're purely model based, then you need to do that, and you need to ask him, and you need to find climate scientists and talk to them about it and get them to explain their position, because at the moment the only representatives for the climate science or the group of climate scientists, as it were, is discredited scientists for whatever reason who are saying I shouldn't have been discredited, like that lady who was talking about polar bear population numbers.
Bears, yes.
There's the Greta Thunberg, who is a 16-year-old who's just going, I'm just saying the science, but she's not actually a scientist. Then you get people like the Extinction Rebellion lot who are going, the world is going to end, and we're all doomed, and also we should all go vegan and live back in mud huts. And none of these people are climatologists, and it's just not helpful. Anyway.
That's more my concern. Is I'm probably more concerned about the people who are using it to push an agenda, whether it's true or not. If you're trying to push an agenda that sort of restricts the rights and freedoms of other people, then I'm going to oppose you. That's basically it. I don't really, as I said in my video, I don't really care about the science anymore, because it's
well, one of the things where that I think is of concern is it goes in that direction you're sort of pointing to, Tailed, is when an agenda is being pushed, but what is hang on, what if the person pushing the agenda is the very scientist supplying you with the information? And
that
this is
doesn't
just
seem to be the case.
Well, but we are basically, was it Mr. Mann, who seems to be a very good friend of the IPCC? When you've got people like that, who are then being explained to us as, well, of course he feels passionate about this, because the science has shown him that something must be done. And it's situations like that where you're looking at it going, the very chap who is one of the leading scientists on this is also, in a way, an activist. And you look at that and you just go, oh, for heaven's sake, how can I trust what is coming from there? That's why I like using the example of, well, 1 in 4 women on campus are raped. Because that's what happens if you
but if you attack the method,
into the hands of the activists.
But Britisher, like 1 in 4 women on campus is rape statistic can be you can attack the methodology on that, because that is a composite of several different studies collated together, some of which who equated having make-up sex with your partner as
25
rape.
years ago, Christina Hoff Sommers took it apart. Yes,
right.
It's still around. I think it was rounded down at some point to 1 in 5 in order to be more, but as such, it then takes Christina Hoff Sommers to chase, I read that book, to actually chase after endlessly these people who have put out certain studies and whatever in order to try and get their data. In fact, some of them, I believe, to this day, have refused to supply her with the data.
Mm-hmm.
What you're effectively asking us is, in order to evaluate this, to study this subject, first off, in order to be able to understand all the jargon, all the endless abbreviations, and everything we use, and then to sift through the academic papers. So, effectively, to kind of do a semi-degree in this particular subject in order to then read it. And you just think, well, yeah, that's all fine and well, but most of us have got lives. So the question is, without having effectively to do a degree in this subject, do we feel that we can, with absolute confidence, believe what we are being supplied here?
And let us end on that rhetorical question. Yes. Otherwise, as you can see, the chat fa la 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 la, which for those of you on the for those of you who've been on the Christmas special, you'll recognise that was something that we did. Matchstick says, yippee k yay. Oh, ylippy k yay. Thank you very much, Matchstick. And then I have some stuff which has come through on Streamlabs. So Lord Makuta Pterodax says, as the break with Rome, Brexit, this being, looms, last week English cardinals, the UK MEPs, took their cathedra's seats for the last time. Cromwell, Cummings, says radical change is coming. Thank you for that, Makuta Pterodax. It's drawing parallels there for the break with the Roman Catholic Church.
Well, but is Cummings Cromwell in that?
That's what Makuta Pterodax is saying. He reckons that Cromwell as Cummings is saying radical change is coming, because Cummings has said radical change is coming, apparently.
Okay. I'm just kind of wondering, is this the Cromwell? Because wasn't there a Cromwell around about the time of Henry VIII?
It's Thomas Cromwell. That was, I think.
Well, yes, but this is what I mean. If we're talking about leaving the Catholic Church, yada yada yada, it would be referring to him.
Let's not forget,
or is this actually a reference to Oliver Cromwell? But then that wouldn't really be with the break of the Catholic Church. Hence, I'm confused.
Well, let's not forget it was Baldric Cromwell who, of course, ushered in the New Age in Britain.
Oh, I'm quite sure Baldric various Baldrics over history ushered in quite a few things.
I'm not sure. If you'd like to elucidate us, Makuta Pterodax in chat, feel free. But yes, thank you for that. Thomas rather than Oliver, people are saying in the chat. That's what I see. Architect of Fate has sent $5. Thank you very much. It says, private prosecution services exist in the UK and can press criminal charges. Please use your platform to charge all of the officers and the politicians who covered this up as accessories for every rape. They should all burn. This is one of the big things. So when we talk about things that I want to achieve with this big project, I want to lay out a proper historical timeline. I'm going to start basically with obviously the most well-known case, which is Rotherham, but I'm going to bring in other anecdotes. I'm aware that up to 72 towns and cities have been affected in the UK. I want to make that very clear, and I want to bring that up and put it on there. I'm going to bring up the stats which talk about the ethnic and religious breakdown of the perpetrators. I feel like no one is talking about the perpetrators, really. There's people like Majid Nawaz who are saying, we need an inquiry. There's people like, who's the chap who's written the book, Fresh Meat, I think it is, or something like that, and which I've just ordered out of interest. Which basically is also a comprehensive breakdown, should really help things out. So I want the perpetrators, I want them all on screen at the moment, and I also want to bring to light the statistics which suggest that only 1% of those guilty are being brought to trial. I want to talk about the obfuscation in the police force and the social services. I'm hoping to be able to speak to a woman named Jane Senior, who presided over the Rotherham 1997 to 2012, basically the programme in social services, which started to reveal things there and get the first prosecutions on the line. And then I want to basically get things to the point where I'm talking about why the police failed. That's going to involve things like the Macpherson report, that whole fear of being racist, why that report was absolute bollocks as well when it came to things like implicit bias, to the point where the actual researchers themselves have not have said that it was misused and they were ignored. And then obviously I want to get to the kind of higher ups and who's responsible, and hopefully expose names, and maybe there's something that we can do with that. But that's, as I say, at least a month or more down the line, and it's a big project. As I say, I expect it to be in the region of a minimum of 45 minutes, and probably going to be an hour or more. So we'll see about that. Any thoughts on my plans with that, gentlemen? Actually,
luck.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed, good luck that you don't end up wanting to slit your wrists by the time you're three-quarters of the way through. It seems about as grim a thing as one could possibly try to be looking into.
I can see people in the chat talking about did I see Sargon's video earlier today? Yes. Thankfully, because he's coming down for Brexit Day, I'm going to have a chance to have a chat with him and see if he's got a folder full of more collated resources that I can also use. He is aware that I'm doing the project, but it should be it needs to be done properly, and not just the information collected properly, but it needs to be presented properly. It needs to be reduced, but not it needs to be reduced down to something which people can digest, but not reduced to the point where you lose clarity on it, because I think that's, at the moment, that's what's been happening. And I also think that talking about what has happened to the victims, I'm hoping, as I say, through contacts with Jane Senior, and I'm trying to remember what the name of the young woman is. I think she's 25 now, and she came forward, and she's been one of the big people. I'm hoping to get an interview with her as well. So it should all it's a lot of work, but we should be able to get that done. Make some graphs and maps. Images are worth 1,000 words. Yeah, and again, I want to do things like I want a massive collage of all the people who've currently been convicted. I've got a great big access to a great big list of all the people who have been convicted, and I'm trying to work out the best way to present that in terms of the statistics for demographic breakdowns and so on. I'm trying to find a way to present it so that I don't get immediately the accusation of racist thrown at me, which means there's probably going to be a section in there talking about how this has been deflected using the phrase Islamophobia and that sort of thing. A little bit of the etymology of that word, so that and its origins in the Muslim Brotherhood to deflect criticism. And I'm aware that it's going to come off a certain way anyway, but if I protect myself with the integrity of the actual product, then I don't care. The information has to go out there. What about Tommy Robinson? He did all this years ago. Tommy Robinson has chosen a certain approach to getting things done. He's also got a checkered past. I've got none of the, as in terms of baggage with the EDL affiliation, the stuff with the BNP, they throw at him constantly, the mortgage fraud and so on. I don't have any of that. So I'm hoping if I produce something, and there will be a section in there both about Tommy Robinson and Jada Franson as well, and why the use of these people has allowed the people who perpetrated this to deflect from their own wrongdoing as well. So that should be good. Be careful not to fall afoul of hate speech laws. Yeah, I am planning on doing fine with that. It's as I say, every single statement has to be backed up. I'm still collating sources. If you have anything, any material, any sources, could be come from the mainstream, could be anecdotal. If it's first or second, if it's first person stuff, I want to hear from you. If it's second person stuff, I'm going to need some evidence that stuff took place, because I can't put. As I say, it's going to be curated, and more of it will come to light as the project solidifies. As it is, we're still in data collection mode and and research, and I'm hoping to be able to share the process with you guys so that it's all clear and it keeps me on track, and it means that we can move through this together. And I'm not going to want to kill myself when we go through it. But yes, that's the general gist. Middle class gatekeepers have shown this topic for too long, and Tommy Robinson wanted to have this conversation. Yeah, I personally, I don't have a lot against Tommy Robinson. I disagree with some of the stuff that's happened under his watch. I disagree with some of the actions that he's taken, but I don't attribute them to anything other than his inability to kind of navigate the middle and upper classes, and also to, I guess, adjust to the idea of being a public figure. He's always been a working class lad's lad. He enjoys scrap, and understandably, with the level and amount of abuse that's been going on. There are some really horrific stories out there, like a man who called the police 5 times to say that his daughter, he was being sent pornography of his daughter being raped by men laughing down the street, and he knew exactly where they were, and he went down there to try and get through the door, and the police arrested him 5 feet from the door because he was going to go in and smash the window and rescue his daughter, and then he never saw her again. So it's some really harrowing stuff in there, and I can totally understand why a lot of people who are very angry, and Tommy Robinson, who is connected to all this stuff and very angry himself, would want to not be very politically correct at all. But I think I can bring a kind of tact to it that is possibly more palatable. That's the idea. Possibly. Tommy, who raises money for a documentary about grooming gangs and instead produces one called Shalom. I've not heard anything from him in the last eight months, I think. So, not since the last time he went to prison. So, if he's been up to anything in the meantime, I don't know. Worth a mention is...
Stutchbury's taking him to court, though.
Sorry?
Stutchbury's taking Tommy Robinson to court.
Is he now? Is he fighting to become relevant? Why is this? Do you know?
Well, basically, he thinks that Mike Stutchbury claims that he's been so stressed and had to leave the UK and stuff because of Tommy doxing him and stuff like that. Well, that'll be interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah, my general idea is that I'm going to try and be as careful with this as I can be without compromising myself. But and I don't know if it's going to go well. And I don't really want to speculate. I want to do it to the best of my ability. I want to do it not just to the best of my ability, but for the sake of the people involved. And I'd rather produce a good project than worry about consequences at the moment, and then we can worry about distribution later, if that makes sense. I want to have something quantifiable, because at the moment I've got part of a script and a lot of sources, but not anything else. Islamophobia was a word that came from the UK Equalities Commission, and the Muslim Brotherhood, originally in Egypt before then. That sort of thing. Okay. I'm
going to drop out just now, man.
No problem. It's been good to have you on, Till. So enjoy.
Speak to you
about. Let's crack on with the super chats, because I don't want to stay on this forever at the moment. Enigmatic says, I fear the only way they will listen is if the Met or South Yorkshire Commissioner was sued or put under judicial review. Hopefully we can expose enough with this that that they can make some changes, or at least get people on the right track in order to start prosecuting the right people. But we shall have to see where the evidence falls and how it takes. The Harry Channel says, the main thing about Potholders' video, just jumping back to climate change for a second, that I took issue with was the idea that we should simply listen to the experts. Yes, it's impossible to be an expert in all subjects, but since this affects policy, we all have an obligation to do the best we can. Yeah. I would agree I do agree with that statement. It's more to do with the idea that you need to pay attention to the fringes, and it's also very easy to get behind someone like this polar bear lady. You remember her, Britisher, who said the polar bear numbers haven't fallen, and with all the talk about how we've all seen the adverts on TV, certainly in this country, where it says, this is Marie, this is the polar bear who lives up on the ice caps, and it's possible that she won't be able to find food this summer because the ice will have melted or something like that. And all of the stories that I can remember are kind of anecdotal like that about the stories. I don't know if Al Gore did something about it with An Inconvenient Truth, but I know that
the polar bear was pretty much adopted as a kind of a symbol early on.
But my point is that she's going, look, here's our think tank, and we're very skeptical about this climate change stuff, and really the polar bear numbers haven't fallen, and they keep using that as a mascot, so it's a real shame. If the polar bear falls, then everything else gets called into question. But the actual research itself, from what I was able to read just briefly in the last couple of days, suggests that polar bear numbers are at risk. They're not falling, but they predict them to be more. The polar bears that are currently existing are more prone to disease. They're getting sick more often. They're more malnourished, even though the numbers haven't specifically fallen yet. So the idea is that it's a present and growing danger as opposed to
they're
the
less healthy animals,
Mm-hmm.
but there are considerably more of them than one thought there would be.
Yeah, they're not an endangered species or
Yeah.
anything like that, right? And I think that people conflating the two is irritating, but if you look at the science involved, like, I'm not going to defend activists who say the polar bears are dying, right? I'm going to defend the science which suggests that, look, the state and the well-being of polar bears is going down, which is a weird enough statement as it is. And
Well, yes,
if we
but
don't...
are their numbers actually increasing or falling?
They're pretty stable, to be honest, at the moment.
Okay, I was under the impression that they were actually...
Do you say that
maybe
again?
I've misread.
You've just cut out for a second there, Britisher, if you say again.
I was under the impression that they were actually increasing.
Well, I haven't seen that, but there we go. People in the chat are saying that polar bears are flourishing. Polar bears have white privilege.
Oh, how silly of us, of course.
There are no more. Okay, well, there you go. So, it's really weird because I both want to take on the topic and at the same time I have absolutely no time to take it on because of other stuff. So we'll have to leave it for now. I really don't want to get stuck on it for this sort of thing. Talking about Stutchbury in the chat, I can see, people, Mark, you should know that a phobia is an unreasonable fear. In what way is it unreasonable in the rape gang scenes? No, I don't think so. I don't think it's unreasonable. And people pointing out that Tommy doesn't sound like me. Yes, I can put on the BBC radio presenter's voice if I need it. Although my voice is cracking this evening. God knows why. The Makuta Pterodax says check Streamlabs, but I think that was in reference to having already done that, so thank you very much for that, man. Teabag says, good luck on the project, have some research funds. Thanks, Teabag. I'm going to do my absolute best, and I'm hopefully going to have a number of you along for the ride with it to sort it out. Lundberg says, a very worthwhile project, looking forward to it. Thank you very much. Sam Capper says, lad, for the layout of it, check an old artist called Andrew Loomis Creative Illustration. I think it will help solve your presentation issues. Thank you very much. I'll definitely take that on board. And Makuta Pterodax says, the illusion for his Cummings and Cromwell remark, this is. He says, the illusion was that Cummings is markedly Thomas Cromwell-like. He is, in Mr. Peter Hitchens' words, a cultural revolutionary, very much a radical, in very much the same vein as Thomas Cromwell's radical reforms. So there you go.
So what's, I mean, forgive me if I'm not all too immediately clear as to, was Thomas Cromwell effectively Henry VIII's man who saw through the change from Catholicism to, the break with Rome?
I don't know.
Am I completely misremembering what I, more than I vaguely read 20 years ago?
According to the power of the internet, and that is at my fingertips, Thomas Cromwell, 1st Earl of Essex, was one of the strongest and most powerful proponents of the English Reformation. He charted an evangelical and reformist course for the Church of England. Let me see. And, yeah, basically helped Henry VIII and the Parliament endorse the King's claim to become the supreme head of the Church of England.
To create the legal structure whereby one was able to do that, because one needed some sort of legalistic excuse of breaking with the tradition which one had followed for centuries.
And he orchestrated the dissolution of the monasteries and all that
so
stuff.
So he was the hatchet man, effectively.
Mm-hmm. So yes, thank you for that. There you go. And Dominic Cummings is going to be our new Cromwell, apparently. You wonder what he'll reform.
Well, I mean, he has made announcements that he wants to reform the civil service. But no sooner was it announced than one already announced that it wasn't going to be as severe as Cummings announced.
Oh, probably not.
So yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? How to reform the unreformable thing.
The civil service hears Dominic Cummings going off script on television about how he's going to reform the civil service, and no sooner has that happened than a statement is issued by the civil service, saying that actually that's not going to happen.
I mean, there is that wonderful thing, isn't it, in one of the very early episodes of Yes Minister, in which, what was it again? It was the Ministry for Administrative Affairs, wasn't it, that Mr. Hacker was running?
Yes.
Or, he is at one point actually told that he doesn't run it. That Humphrey runs it. He is just there to secure the budget, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
But at one point, he actually finds out that they've hired, is it 500 more staff? It's a few hundred anyway.
Yes, they brought on 500.
It is then explained to him that he tasked them with finding ways in which to cut the civil service.
Yes.
Given that they didn't have any people just standing around ready to be able to undertake that investigation, they then had to hire those people. So here he is trying to find out how he could cut the civil service, and the first thing to result from that is 500 more civil servants.
Yes, not to mention, of course, the fact that by the end of the episode he still fails to get rid of them. Speaking of Yes Minister, actually, the chap who played Bernard died this week.
Yes, he did indeed.
Which is very sad. He was quite young as well, wasn't he? He was only in his 70s, I think, early 70s.
I wouldn't know. I mean, he was clearly the young. He was the young chicken in the actual series. So I think he's pretty much the last person to be surviving, if you know what I mean.
Oh no, he died at 82. Derek Folds is his name. Yes.
But yes, he had that. He had that skill of basically being the person sitting or standing between the two others, and just basically soaking up the scenery while they did their monologues. But at the same time, always being a perfect part of it. It's difficult to describe. That it must be difficult to be the person who doesn't have a lot to say, but you're almost always on screen.
And he's so memorable as well. All these little witty interjections, and also he was kind of the foil to Humphrey because he was new, but also slightly more sympathetic to the minister.
Well, I believe one of his roles was always to, whenever they try to make, whenever they try to use some cliche or whatever, he is always the one to point out that doesn't work because they're mixing their cliches.
Yes.
And he always sort of, in the middle of some important meeting, he says, well, it can't be done, surely. And they all sort of turn to him, going, sort of, shut up, Bernard.
I'm going to have to rewatch all of Yes Minister now. Like, as soon as I get some off hours, it's just going to be like, what will I binge when I can't think, I liked Bernard.
Well, I mean, no, you won't have any time to. You won't have any time to watch. You won't have any time to watch Yes Minister because you'll be researching climate change.
Oh yeah, well, climate change, the grooming gangs. I've got another. Like, I tell you what, I quite run off my feet this week. I don't like to be like, blow my own trumpet or anything like that. Right. So I've been.
What do you mean, like someone constantly going on about having been retweeted by John?
Oh, stop it! I've got a qualitative proposal. It's called, where I'm basically designing a study to increase retention of the armed forces. That's due on Wednesday. On Wednesday, I'm also launching an intervention program for, unfortunately, it's only female, it's a pilot study into female domestic violence survivors, but unfortunately there only being 2 male refugees. It was impossible to get participants to run a male study. So we're running a 3-month intervention trying to improve the well-being of domestic violence survivors. That's going on. Then there's the grooming gangs scandal case that are going on. Now apparently I've got to do climate change on top of that, although I'm definitely not going to do that, so have no fear, everybody. on top of the regular
Precisely,
stuff.
because you've got a life to live.
Indeed. And then watch Yes Minister on the off hours, All that whilst courting several dozen netball teams, as it were.
Of course.
Female netball teams. And going on my tour as Ivan Reberov. So, there you go. Right.
Yeah, it's particularly your rendition of Ochi Charnya I particularly enjoy. Yes.
Sure, mate. Sure. Because I'm aware of the songs that I sing. Like, it's all nonsense to me. The fact that it came out in Russian really makes no difference. In more positive...
That reminds me of that Clint Eastwood film. Perhaps anybody in the chat will know what on earth I'm talking about. I don't remember the name of the film anymore, but he is basically some pilot scarred, obviously it being Hollywood, still scarred by his experience of Vietnam or whatever. And they bring him back because he can speak fluent Russian. And there is some super stealth aircraft that the Soviets have developed. And it's so incredibly advanced. Not only is it faster than everything else, it is actually controlled by your thoughts. So built into the helmet is a way in which to read your thoughts.
All right.
And so basically, if you want to launch missiles, you just think launch missiles.
Okay.
So therefore, they need someone who can speak Russian. And he can speak Russian, the Clint Eastwood character. Is it Firefox? I might be misremembering this. That might be it.
That's what people are saying in the chat.
Oh, well, there you go. So he, at one point, I remember, he actually thinks in English, as in fire missiles. And then suddenly, don't. And then has to tell him, basically force himself to think it in Russian, and then he launches the missile. So yeah, I'm quite sure, this is something I remember from having seen someone in, 80s or something like that. It's more than likely incredibly hokey and has aged terribly. But I still sort of distinctly remember sort of one or two things. So just there where you said, oh well, you're not even aware of what you're singing as such. You just hear it in English. Yes, that's pretty much Clint Eastwood sitting in the jet.
I maintain that the best aircraft-based film of all time happens.
Here we go.
Happens to be Hot Shots.
Hot Shots par deux or Hot Shots?
I enjoyed both, but Part Deux. I liked Part Deux, but the first one was more the Top Gun
aircraft.
The first part, which is the one I'm more interested in, was the one with which was basically all a Top Gun spin-off, Top Gun parody rather, right down to the same scene where Charlie Sheen mirrors Tom Cruise going on this motorbike and meeting a girl and then taking her back to his place after a while, and when he's done with her, she's in a girl-shaped hole in the bed. It's fantastic.
Well, anyway. There you go. Yes, as is only right and proper. Yes,
it's just I love that film. It's complete nonsense, but it's very funny.
Of course, yes. It's never attempting to be highbrow. How shall we say? That is one of the things with films, isn't it? That it's what it sets. Does it do what it set out to do? So that's why, for example, I say the film 300 is actually a very decent film, because it doesn't actually try to go grandiose. It's a fairly contained affair.
It bored me, if I'm honest.
It does what it says on the box. So at times, particularly the death scenes, I'm sorry, but the dialogue just becomes excruciating. But as such, it does fairly well what it sets out to do. Whereas Gladiator, and just get ready for all of them screaming in the chat, Gladiator is just tosh, because it tries to be Spartacus and Ben-Hur, and never gets anywhere near it. And yes, hence, if you just make a sort of a comedy and it's supposed to be daft, and you're not actually trying to, set a new record for witticism, and you, in a way, just, it does what it says on the tin.
You claim
And
not.
it's still a decent film.
You claim not to set. It doesn't set a new standard for witticism, but I maintain anything with Leslie Nielsen in it was absolute gold. Right down to the credits, like the opening to was it The Naked Gun?
Yes.
Or any of them really, and they get more and more elaborate, and or Tales from Police Squad, right? And
what is it? I still remember when they go into that. I think it's The Naked Gun. They go into this kind of sex shop, this adult establishment, and the lady with how do we say, is rather well endowed in a low cut top, looks at him and goes, "Is this a bust or what?" And he just looks at her and goes, "Yes, quite impressive, madam. Question." Meanwhile, behind him, his friend is trying out all these electric toys, and they're just, so basically over his shoulder as they're talking, you can see the other guy, and they're just getting more and more outlandish.
Well, there's
it's a thing of beauty.
There's things like he goes to his gadget man, and they're trialing out an anti-graffiti wall that urinates back on people who urinate on it. But also in that scene, because obviously there's quite a lot of.
I wonder who that is spoofing.
There's Demolition Man, I think, but there's quite a lot of funniness in that. But in that scene itself, you know how sometimes sets are built on film sets, where the camera needs to be able to go between two rooms, and so there's no front wall, obviously, so they can record everything, and the camera goes through. And it goes past the divide in the wall, and it's literally, you can see it there, but it's remarkably well hidden by just the smoothness and transition. Well, in The Naked Gun, Leslie Nielsen can't get through the door at the same time as the chap, so he walks around that partition, and it's just one of those little things that sticks with you.
Deliberately break the pretense.
It's just fantastic, and everything of that airplane. What was the other one? The other big one that Leslie Nielsen did when he was at the peak of his fame. I can't remember, because there were 3 Naked Guns, weren't there?
Yes.
There was Airplane 1, 2, and more. Anyway, I loved all his work. As ridiculous and
O.J. Simpson. Yes, and him being dragged away under the bus, and he's where? Oh, such and such. Oh, well, give him a ticket and a new pair of pants. That's just, it's just beautiful.
A super chat's just come in. Says, in your department, NSO, how prevalent is standpoint theory, the strong program, and other science relativism? There are 2 members of staff. For those of you who don't know, standpoint theory is basically the idea that everything is subjective. There is no truth. It's a weird one where it's kind of like an individual's own perspective is shaped by their social and political experiences, and so the idea is that if you're a black woman, and black women in general may share some particular perspectives, but they're not defined by these viewpoints. So there is essentially there's no like black female identity, because it's all too intersectional, if that makes sense. And there are 2 members of staff who kind of push this. I won't name their names, but one of them is also a big proponent of something called Foucauldian analysis. Most methods of analysis, particularly for qualitative data, which is text, it's like if you interview someone, it's the transcript of text that you produce from that's qualitative data. That analysis, which has no rules in order to prevent, in terms of its interpretation, and they all rely on a rather woolly concept called reflexivity, which is basically the idea that you assess a piece of information, you then assess your own internal biases and your own politics and so on and so forth, and then you reevaluate the data, trying to see whether or not you've shown bias anywhere in it. But it's all entirely down to the researcher whether or not they consider themselves to have applied that bias. especially if you're working in a group of people who are also trained in Foucauldian analysis and are also very likely to share both the same politics and the same points of view. A lot of the bias gets through that sort of thing. So, I would say two people in a department. It's quite a large department. I haven't really noticed it prevalently anywhere else, although it is predominantly left-wing, I will give it that. I was at the staff Christmas party and they said, how do you think this whole Brexit thing is going to go? And I said, I think it's going to go ahead. And they were asking about the election at the time. And I said, well, it's not a question of if Boris is going to win, but by how much. And the look of disgust on the faces around me was something to behold. So there's quite a lot of bias in the department. But
so even if you were left-wing, but still thought the other side was going to win, it was still disgusting of you to say so.
No, not disgusting of me. Just this, like, I'm quite well liked by the people. But I tend to keep...
You astound me.
I quite like politics. Shut up, you. How is that different from phenomenology? The phenomenological approach is
How many times can you say that in a row without stumbling over it?
Say phenomenology 5 times fast, that sort of
Yeah.
Phenomenology is more associated with
Now you're just showing off.
Will you stop it? It's more of a philosophical approach. Again, it lacks a thematic focus, but Foucauldian analysis is based primarily on, obviously, the works of Foucault. I'm trying to think, because it's been a little while since I had a look at it. Because it's not something I really utilise myself. I tell you what, I won't waffle on at you and make something up, or rapidly Wikipedia something. If I may have a think about it, and I might produce a video on it at some point in the future. But unfortunately, I'm not familiar enough with the doctrine to lay out the ins and outs of the specifics of why it's different, unfortunately, right now. The only I have one more story for this evening. Which is more positive, which is fairly short, but there you go. So, for those of you who are looking to celebrate Brexit Day, whether or not low key or high key, if you can't make it down to Parliament Square to say hi, or if you are indeed abroad and you simply want to enjoy things, you'll be happy to know that if you ever walk into a Wetherspoons on January 31st, you'll find that the prices have all been cut to celebrate January 31st. I can tell the Britisher is most excited by this, knowing how much he loves to drink.
Oh, yes. So basically, by how much is the price of Coca-Cola going to be reduced?
I don't think it will be. But it's an act of good faith. It's something that of goodwill, like a kind of graciousness and victory, or humble in victory, because it's literally called the Let's Stay Friends offer. And it's going to cut 60p off certain drinks, which for Wetherspoons, where the average price of a pint is about anywhere between 2 and 3 quid, is not too bad. It's actually really nice. They want to we want to remain friends with our European neighbours and offer a range of drinks at an excellent price. Mr. Martin, a staunch supporter of Brexit, had promised to slash beer prices if the UK left the European Union by October 31st, but this was delayed. And they claim that they'll host this Brexit offer in all 870 of their pubs. So I thought that was a nice thing to look forward to for Brexit Day, especially given all the negative press around it at the moment, which is driving me a bit spare, to be honest. Although I think that even the media are sick of talking about Brexit, or are kind of at the point where they don't want to talk about it anymore. Hence the massive focus on the Harry and Meghan debacle.
Well, okay. I mean, I think when it comes to Harry and Meghan, that is going to be a focus anyway, just simply due to the obsession of the media with royalty. But when it comes to the magnanimity and whatever, I think a beautiful example of such magnanimity is the Brexit bong saga.
Oh, with the Big Ben.
Yes. I just found that remarkable. That it, even when one suggested to crowdfund it, one still found some sort of bureaucratic means by which to say, well, yes, but can't be done.
Well, what I can't understand is what's happened to the cost. Because in order to get it to bong out for New Year's Eve or whatever it was, they were projecting a cost of £14,600. So where on earth $500,000 has come from in the last 2 weeks?
I think, either they are once again being wonderfully disingenuous, or how shall we say? I am tempted to believe them on this, if you know what I mean. That not having expected this to be an issue, they had dismantled certain things.
Right.
So it would be a matter of the bell having to be raised back up into the tower again. The mechanism, and even though they don't actually use the full mechanism, but some of the mechanism needs to be attached to the bell and whatever. At the same time, for the bell to sound the way the bell does, you then need to put the floor back in of the bell room.
Mm-hmm.
So in that regard, one could see why this, given that this would all be very specialist work, why this could cost a lot of money.
Mm.
I still don't understand why it would cost $500,000, but one could see why that it could have a big price tag attached.
I know that Stand Up.
Go ahead.
I know that Stand Up for Brexit have been running a fundraiser called Big Ben Must Bong for Brexit, and they have raised £270,000 of 320 that they're aiming for so far. So it could happen. You never know.
Well, I mean, I don't think it will happen that they will raise the money, because they've basically been told it won't happen now. So that's why I think the fundraising capacity has shrunk dramatically, if you know what I mean. Because once you're told it's not going to happen, because Parliament actually says that they couldn't accept a fundraiser.
Oh. Why?
Oh, yeah,
I mean, they're happy to raise tax, but they won't accept money given.
Oh, yeah, you've not heard that they would not be able. There is no, how shall we say? There is no sort of parliamentary facility. There is no way. There is no process of accepting a money raised by a fundraiser to facilitate this. So the entire reason for this being dismissed is technical, and that's why I felt, because I sort of thought, well, okay, if it can't be done, it can't be done. I don't think this should be seen as a big issue. But at the same time,
no, the big issue will be being sold on the edge of Parliament Square, next to where the road.
But you can't help but sort of feel there is something terribly petty of insisting that you will not accept a bell ringing. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, I think I must go. I can hear my phone call. So that must be my delivery arriving. So my groceries are about to arrive. So I will need to depart, I'm afraid.
No problem. Good to see you, Britisher. Thank you very much. Take care. Whilst the Britisher sorts out his groceries, I will finish things off. When it comes to Big Ben, I feel like someone needs to get something to mark the occasion, definitely. If it's not going to be fireworks, it's got to be a gong of some description. But I don't necessarily share the British cynicism when it comes to, there's no mechanism for us to accept this money. I think it's perfectly reasonable that government is so slow at dealing with things that it's not caught up to the concept of crowdfunding yet. And I hope that it does bong for Brexit Day, but I'm not holding out hope. Until then, I think I'm just going to plan to see what's going on. As I say, I will be going down to Parliament Square about 3 o'clock in the afternoon to have a chat to some people, to meet up with some friends. As I don't know who wants to reveal that they are coming and who doesn't want to reveal that they're coming, I won't name any particular names, apart from the fact that Sargon will be there to interview some people as well. And that should be fun. I am. It's my birthday next week, so we're going to run a kind of birthday Fake Accents Unite. Should be fun. And in the meantime, as soon as Wednesday has come and gone, I should be able to give my full attention to my big project and finishing off the second attachment theory video as well, because I think that's going to be appreciated by a lot of people. Until then, please stay strong, please stay safe, and enjoy your week. I hope it all goes well for all of you. It's been a real pleasure to have you here this evening. Thank you to everyone who donated, supported the stream. It keeps me afloat, really, and it's very much appreciated. My dad's just gone into hospital as well, and every penny really has been put to good use and appreciated. So thank you very much for that. Until next week, then, I leave you simply with my goodwill, and I hope that you have a great week. Take care, everybody, and good night.